A young man, a ghost in a sanctuary of hope, until one woman truly saw him. And that one moment would change his world. The afternoon light streamed through the grand arched windows of St. Michael's Cathedral, painting the marble floors in hues of sapphire and ruby. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and melting candle wax. In the last pew, tucked away in the shadows, sat Leo Harrison, his hands resting on the wheels of his chair. He chose this spot for its anonymity, a place where he could be present without truly being seen. It hadn't always been this way. 2 years ago, he'd been the one leading the volunteer team, scaling ladders to clean the high windows, his laughter echoing in the cavernous space. 2 years ago, he'd spent his weekdays at a wildlife rescue, his greatest pride being the rehabilitation of a fierce, injured bobcat. He'd admired its untamed spirit, its refusal to be broken. Then came the fall, a misstep on a rocky trail, and the wild, free part of his life felt as distant as a half-forgotten dream. The accident had taken more than the use of his legs. It had taken the man he used to be, leaving a quiet observer in his place. The priest's voice resonated from the altar, a call for peace and reflection. "Let us offer a sign of peace to our neighbors," he announced. Leo watched the practiced ritual unfold. The rustle of clothes, the polite handshakes, the warm smiles exchanged between friends and families. He remained still, an island in the gentle current of fellowship. A man in a nearby pew caught his eye, gave a tight, pitying smile, and quickly turned back to his family. Leo was used to it, the awkward glances, the well-meaning but clumsy offers of help, the way people spoke to the person behind him instead of directly to him. He had become a fixture, a piece of the scenery. Then, a new sound cut through the murmurs. A soft tap-tap-tap on the metal frame of his wheelchair. Leo looked down to see a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with bright, curious eyes and a halo of untamed curly hair. In her hand, she held a small, colorful drawing. It was a cat, with pointy ears and wild whiskers, rendered in bold purple crayon. "This is for you," she said, her voice a clear, confident whisper. "It's a bobcat. They're my favorite." Before Leo could find his voice, a woman with warm, intelligent eyes and a kind smile stepped into the aisle beside him. She placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "Maya, what did I say about wandering off?" she chided softly, though her eyes were full of affection. She then looked directly at Leo, her gaze open and genuine. "I'm sorry if she's bothering you. She's a bit obsessed with wildcats." Leo was struck by the simple directness of her address. She wasn't talking down to him or looking past him. She was just talking to him. "No, it's okay," he managed, his voice a little rough from disuse. "It's a very good bobcat." Maya beamed. "Do you like them?" He felt a genuine smile touch his lips for the first time that day. "I do. I used to work with them." The woman's eyebrows rose in interest. "Is that right? I'm Eris, by the way. This is Maya." "Leo," he replied. "Well, Leo," Eris said, gesturing to the empty space in the pew beside his chair. "Would you mind if we joined you? Maya's convinced the back row has the best view of the stained glass angel." Leo hesitated for only a second. He had guarded his solitude for 2 years, wrapping it around himself like a protective cloak. But in the face of this simple, unpitying kindness, he felt it begin to fall away. "Of course," he said, a warmth spreading through his chest. Maya slipped into the pew, immediately launching into a detailed explanation of her drawing, while Eris sat beside her, listening with a smile. For the rest of the service, Leo wasn't an invisible man in a wheelchair. He was just Leo, a man who knew a thing or two about bobcats, sitting with his new neighbors in the last pew of St. Michael's Cathedral. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt a flicker of hope, as bright and as brilliant as the light streaming through the glass. Maya launched into a whispered explanation of her drawing. "This one's a bobcat, but he's a nice one, not grumpy. And this is his friend, the fox, but I ran out of orange crayon, so he's kind of yellow." Eris chuckled, leaning forward to rest her elbows on her knees. "Sorry," she murmured to Leo. "She's never met a stranger." "It's okay," Leo said. And to his surprise, he meant it. When the next prayer began, the congregation bowed their heads once more. Leo kept his up, watching the way the light danced across the marble floor. He had stopped expecting prayers to change anything for him. But then Eris did something he hadn't anticipated. Instead of bowing her head, she shifted in the pew, and then slowly, she knelt beside his wheelchair, putting herself at eye level with him. "You praying for something?" she asked, her voice low and steady. Leo's throat tightened. No one had asked him that in years. Not since the accident. Not since the doctors had delivered the final verdict. Not since his fiancée had left because, as she'd said, Loving him had become too hard. He swallowed. Just to stop feeling broken, he admitted, the words slipping out before he could catch them. Eris didn't flinch. She didn't offer empty platitudes about God's mysterious plan, or how everything happened for a reason. She just nodded, a deep understanding in her eyes. And then, right there in the middle of the cathedral, she prayed aloud. God, help Leo see what we do. Someone brave as hell. The simplicity of it, the raw honesty, hit him like a physical blow. No one had called him brave in a long time. Strong, maybe. Resilient, sometimes. But brave? That felt different. When the prayer ended and the congregation echoed their amens, Maya tugged at his sleeve again. Want to see the rest of my drawings after church? She asked, her eyes bright. For the first time in months, Leo laughed, a real, unforced sound. But as the service wrapped up and people began filing out, Leo caught the way a few heads turned toward them, the way whispers trailed in their wake. He couldn't make out the words, but the looks were familiar. Curiosity, judgment, the unspoken question of why a woman like Eris would bother with someone like him. Eris either didn't notice or didn't care. She stood, offering Leo a small smile. You coming to coffee hour? He hesitated. I don't want to keep you from. Nah, you're not, she interrupted easily. Besides, Maya's decided you're her new best friend. Good luck getting rid of her now. Leo glanced at the little girl, who was now attempting to balance her bobcat, drawing on his wheelchair's armrest. Something warm flickered in his chest, something he hadn't felt in what felt like a lifetime. Hope. But as they made their way toward the parish hall, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that Eris was hiding something. The way her smile didn't always reach her eyes. The way she tensed when someone clapped her on the back too suddenly. He had no idea that their lives were about to collide in ways neither of them could have predicted. The scars beneath the smile, the parish hall buzzed with the familiar hum of Sunday morning chatter, the clinking of ceramic cups, the laughter of children weaving between tables, the occasional burst of a hymn from the elderly group in the corner. Leo followed Eris and Maya at a careful distance, his wheelchair gliding smoothly over the polished floor. He still wasn't sure why he had agreed to. Come. Coffee hour meant small talk, and small talk meant questions, the kind he had spent the last 2 years avoiding. How are you holding up? What a shame, such a young man. Maya, oblivious to his hesitation, tugged her mother's sleeve and pointed to a plate of brownies. Can I have 2? Eris ruffled her hair. 1. And eat it slowly. She glanced back at Leo, her expression unreadable for a moment before she nodded toward an empty table near the window. You want to sit over there? Less traffic. He appreciated that. The way she didn't assume he needed help, but still noticed what might make things easier. Yeah, thanks. They settled in, Maya immediately launching into a story about her pet hamster while crumbs tumbled down her dress. Eris listened with half an ear, her gaze occasionally flickering toward the door as if expecting someone. Leo stirred his coffee, the steam curling into the air. So that's an interesting tattoo, he said, nodding at the small, intricate compass rose on her forearm. Eris's fingers absently traced the ink. It's a reminder, she said quietly, to find my own direction. I spent a long time following someone else's map. It's a reminder, she said quietly, to find my own direction. I spent a long time following someone else's map. There was more to it. He could tell by the way her jaw tightened just slightly, the way her thumb pressed into her palm as if to steady herself. But before he could ask, a voice cut in. Eris Thorne. I thought that was you. A middle-aged man in a crisp clerical collar approached, his smile a little too wide, his hand already outstretched. Eris stood, shaking it, but her posture had gone rigid. Father Michael, she said, her voice even. We've missed you at the women's auxiliary, the priest said, his tone light, but his eyes sharp. You know, the group could really use someone with your spirit. Strong leadership, very organized. I've been busy, Eris interrupted, not unkindly, but with a note of finality. The priest's gaze slid to Leo, then down to his wheelchair, his practiced smile never wavering. And who is this? Something in Leo's chest went cold. He knew that look, the polite curiosity that was just a thin veil for pity. He opened his mouth to answer, but Eris spoke first. Leo, she said, simple and firm, as if that were all the introduction he needed. The priest hesitated, then nodded. Well, it's lovely to see you getting out, Leo. We're always happy to welcome new people. New people? As if he hadn't been in that same back pew for 2 years. The moment stretched, awkward and heavy, until Maya, blessedly oblivious, held up her half-eaten brownie. Father, do you think there were bobcats in the Garden of Eden? The priest blinked, then chuckled. I suppose there might have been, child. With a final pat on Maya's shoulder, he excused himself, melting back into the crowd. Eris sank back into her chair, her shoulders relaxing a fraction. Leo studied her over the rim of his cup. You don't like him? Eris exhaled a short, quiet sound. It's not that. I don't like performances. He understood. The way people wore their faith like a badge, expecting everyone else to polish theirs just as brightly. Maya, bored with the adult silence, slid off her chair and tugged at Leo's arm. Want to see the playground? It has a ramp and everything. Eris opened her mouth, probably to scold her, but Leo surprised himself by nodding. Sure. The playground was empty, the morning still too cool for most families to linger outside. Maya bolted for the swings, leaving Leo and Eris trailing behind. You don't have to do this, Eris said quietly. She's used to people saying no. Leo watched Maya pump her legs, her sneakers kicking at the air. I know, but I want to. They lapsed into silence, the only sounds the creak of the swing chains and the distant murmur of voices from inside. Then, without warning, Eris spoke again. My ex-husband, David. Her voice was rough, as if the words were being dragged out of her. Father Michael gave the sermon at our wedding. Leo stilled. I'm sorry. Eris's gaze was fixed on some distant point, her fingers flexing at her sides. He talked about wifely duties and submission, sacrifice and honor. All the right words. A bitter smile twisted her mouth. David would have loved it. He didn't know what to say. There were no right words for that kind of loss, the loss of oneself. So he just listened. And that, it seemed, was enough. Maya's voice shattered the moment. Mom, push me higher. Eris's mask slid back into place, the pain tucked away as quickly as it had surfaced. Hold on, sweetie. She glanced at Leo. You good here? He nodded, and she jogged off toward the swings, leaving him alone with his thoughts. That was when he saw it. The way Eris's hands trembled just slightly as she pushed Maya. The way her breath hitched when Maya laughed too loud. The way she kept glancing back toward the church, as if afraid of who might walk out. Her body was coiled tight, ready. He recognized the signs. He'd seen them in the mirror often enough. Eris Thorne wasn't just a single mom. She was a woman still at war, even if the battlefield was only in her mind. And Leo had the unsettling feeling that whatever peace she'd found today, with him, with Maya, in this quiet moment, was as fragile as thin ice. Inside the cathedral, the bells tolled, signaling the end of coffee hour. People began trickling out, calling goodbyes, herding children toward cars. Eris turned back to him, Maya now clinging to her arm. You need help getting into your van? Leo shook his head. I'm good. But, thanks for today. She nodded, and for a second, he thought she might say something else. But Maya yawned loudly, rubbing her eyes, and the moment passed, dissolving into the cool morning air. Next Sunday? Eris asked, her voice soft. Leo hesitated, the quiet world he'd built for himself warring with the unexpected warmth of the last hour. Then, just as softly, yeah. Next Sunday. As he wheeled himself toward the accessible van parking, the sun warm on his shoulders, he realized something. For the first time in a very long time, he was looking forward to it. But fate, as it turned out, had other plans. Because that night, long after the cathedral doors had closed and the playground had fallen silent, Leo's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a single sentence. Stay away from Eris Thorne. The shadow of the past Leo froze, the bluish glow of the screen illuminating his face in the dark room, highlighting the tension lines around his eyes. Stay away from Eris Thorne. Who would send this? And why? He almost deleted it, dismissing it as a bizarre wrong number, but something made him hesitate. There was an attachment. He tapped it open. It was a photo of a faded newspaper clipping. The headline read, Thorne Foundation under scrutiny. Wife's complicity questioned? The image showed a younger Eris, her hair perfectly styled, her suit immaculate, standing slightly behind a handsome, smiling man. But her eyes were the same, and they were hollow, haunted. The same eyes that now held stories she refused to tell. The phone dropped onto his lap with a dull thud. Leo took a deep breath, his fingers trembling slightly. For 2 years, he had carefully built a life devoid of surprises, of risks. And now, in a single day, a woman and her daughter had broken through that barrier, bringing with them secrets he wasn't sure he wanted to uncover. The next morning, Leo awoke to the sound of rain, tapping against his window. The gray sky matched his mood. He checked his phone again. The message was still there, a digital stain that couldn't be erased. Leo, his home care nurse, called from the hallway. Physical therapy in an hour. You ready? Yeah, he replied automatically, though the thought of facing the community health center in this rain made him want to stay in bed all day. But there was another reason for his reluctance. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m., Eris Thorne showed up at the same facility, bringing Maya to an occupational therapy session in the pediatric wing. And after that message, Leo wasn't sure he was ready to see her. The rehabilitation center smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Leo focused on his exercises, the muscles in his arms and back burning as he worked on the resistance bands. Then he heard it, an unmistakable giggle. Maya. She was hopping down the hallway, clutching a colorful painting, while Eris tried to keep up without spilling the 2 coffee cups she was holding. When Eris's eyes met Leo's, she stopped abruptly. "Hey," she said, a hint of uncertainty in her smile. Leo hesitated, the anonymous message burning in his mind. But then Maya appeared beside him, breathless. "Look," she held up the painting. "It's a bobcat in the rain. Mommy helped me," she added. "She says you have to find your own sunshine on cloudy days." Eris winced slightly. "It's just a saying, kiddo." It was the first time Leo had heard a hint of the philosophy behind her quiet strength. Before he could respond, however, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Eris, I thought I'd find you here." A tall woman in a pantsuit that cost more than Leo's monthly rent approached with confident strides. Eris stiffened so suddenly that Maya stopped smiling and hid behind her mother's legs. "Rebecca," Eris greeted, her tone icy. The stranger, Rebecca, completely ignored Leo, as if his wheelchair rendered him invisible. "We need to talk. In private. I have nothing to say to you." Rebecca lowered her voice, but Leo still caught it. "You think disappearing for 2 years erases what happened? The board still wants answers, Eris. And David isn't here to protect you anymore." Eris's voice was so sharp it could have cut glass. "Don't you dare speak his name to me." She knelt quickly beside her daughter. "Let's go look at the fish tank, okay, sweetie?" But Rebecca wasn't finished. Her eyes finally landed on Leo, assessing him. "Didn't know you were socializing again." Something in that look made Leo shrink. It was as if she didn't see him, but rather a piece in a game only she understood. Eris noticed. In one fluid motion, she stood, positioning herself between Leo and Rebecca. "Let's go," she murmured to him, ignoring the other woman completely. But Rebecca didn't back down. "Eris," she called, her voice now laced with a veiled threat. "Remember what's at stake." That was when Leo saw it, the almost imperceptible tremor in Eris's hands as she held the coffee cups. The same coiled tension he'd noticed at the playground. But this wasn't the echo of a distant battlefield. This was a current war, and the enemy was standing right in front of them. But now there was something else in her eyes, fear. Eris scooped Maya into her arms and, without another word, guided Leo away with a light touch on the back of his wheelchair. They didn't stop until they were outside in the cold, drizzling rain. "Who was that?" Leo asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Eris didn't answer immediately. Maya, now perched on her hip, played with the raindrops, distracted. "Someone from my past," Eris finally said, her voice tight. "Someone who shouldn't be here." Leo wanted to press further, but her expression, a shuttered, defensive mask, stopped him. There was a story there, one he was beginning to suspect was connected to that anonymous message. And then, as if the universe had decided this moment needed more drama, Leo's phone buzzed again. This time, it was another photo, a grainy screenshot from a news report showing Eris being led through a crowd by security guards, her face a mask of strain. The headline screamed, "Foundation VP questioned in embezzlement scandal." Below it, a new message. "You really think she's a saint? Ask her what happened in Geneva." Rain streaked across the phone screen, blurring the words, but not enough to hide the truth now unfolding before him. Eris turned, noticing his expression. "Leo, you okay?" He closed his eyes for a second, then tucked the phone into his pocket. "I'm fine," he lied. But nothing about this moment was fine. Because now Leo had a choice to make. Walk away, as the messages demanded, or dive headfirst into the secrets surrounding Eris Thorne. And for the first time since his accident, he felt something he hadn't in years. The unsettling thrill of standing on the edge of something that could change everything. The weight of secrets. The rain fell harder as Leo sat in his van, staring at the message on his phone. The photo of Eris blurred under the droplets hitting his windshield, but the word embezzlement remained seared into his mind. What had she been involved in? And why was someone so determined to keep him away from her? He jumped when a knock sounded on his window. Eris stood there, Maya sheltered under her jacket, both of them soaked. Her expression was unreadable through the rain-streaked glass. Leo hesitated for a long moment, before pressing the button to roll down the window halfway. "You left without saying goodbye," Eris said. Water dripped from her hair onto her lashes, making her blink. Beside her, Maya sneezed. Leo's grip tightened on his phone. He should show her the messages, demand answers. But the way Maya shivered stopped him. "You're both drenched," he said instead. "Get in." The van filled with the scent of wet fabric and the quiet patter of rain on the roof. Maya immediately crawled into the back, starting to explain her painting to the empty seat beside her. Eris hesitated before getting into the passenger seat, her presence making the space feel suddenly smaller. "You're upset," she stated, watching him carefully. Leo kept his eyes on the road as he pulled out of the parking lot. "That woman back there, Rebecca. Who is she?" Eris exhaled sharply through her nose. "Part of the Foundation's legal team. An old colleague. And why does a corporate lawyer want to talk to you 2 years after you left?" The silence stretched so long Leo thought she wouldn't answer. Then, barely audible over the rain, she said, "Because some accounts never close." Maya chose that moment to lean forward between the seats. "Leo, can we get hot chocolate?" Her small fingers left damp spots on his shoulder. The mundane request shattered the tension. Eris's shoulders relaxed slightly as Leo nodded. "There's a diner up ahead." The diner's warmth enveloped them as they slid into a booth. Maya immediately began making faces at her reflection in the chrome napkin holder, while Eris methodically wiped rainwater from her daughter's face with a paper napkin. Leo watched them, the anonymous messages burning a hole in his pocket. This woman, who so carefully cared for her child, could she really be the person in that news clipping? "So," Eris said as their hot chocolates arrived, her voice low, "are you going to tell me why you looked like you'd seen a ghost back there?" Maya blew on her steaming drink, oblivious to the adult tension. Leo took a deep breath. He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. "Someone doesn't want us talking." Eris's face went pale as she scrolled through the messages. Her hand trembled slightly, not from the cold, Leo realized, but from something deeper. When she reached the photo from the news report, her jaw tightened into a hard line. Her jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped. "Mommy." Maya peered up, sensing the shift. "Are you okay?" "Yes, sweetie." Eris forced a smile and smoothed her daughter's hair. "Why don't you go ask the waitress if they have any more purple crayons?" The moment Maya scampered off, Eris's mask cracked. "Leo, listen. Just tell me if it's true," he interrupted, his voice low but firm. "Were you involved? Did you take the money?" The words hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the diner's windows. Eris stared into her untouched drink. "It's complicated." "That's not an answer." She looked up then, and the raw pain in her eyes startled him. "I signed the documents I was told to sign. Then, I refused to sign them anymore. Both decisions destroyed my life." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The truth isn't in those headlines, Leo. But it's not clean either." Maya returned triumphantly with a fistful of crayons, breaking the moment. "She gave me 3. A genuine smile touched Eris's lips, though it didn't reach her eyes, as she helped Maya spread them out on a napkin. Leo studied them. The careful way Eris made sure the crayons didn't roll off the table, the concentration on Maya's face as she chose a color. This was the contradiction that confused him most. The woman who could be so gentle and present with her child, yet carried a shadow so dark someone felt the need to warn him away. His phone buzzed again. Eris's eyes snapped to it. Leo hesitated before checking. A new message. Ask her about the orphanage in Geneva. The one that was never registered. His breath caught. When he looked up, Eris was watching him, her face a mask of resignation. "You're getting more," she guessed. He nodded. Maya, sensing the renewed tension, climbed into her mother's lap. "Can Leo come to my school's art show next week?" The innocent question seemed to shatter something in Eris. She pressed her forehead against her daughter's for a brief moment before answering. "We'll see, sweetie." Leo expected her to shut down, to make excuses and leave. Instead, she met his gaze squarely. "Come to my place tomorrow," she said quietly. "I'll show you the legal documents, the bank statements, everything. Then you can decide if we're worth the trouble." The vulnerability in her voice undid him. Because Leo recognized it. The fear of being judged by your worst moments, the desperate hope that someone might see past them. He knew that fear intimately. "Okay," he agreed softly. As they stepped back into the rain, Maya insisted on holding Leo's hand as he wheeled alongside them, her small fingers sticky from hot chocolate. Eris walked slightly ahead, her shoulders tense against the downpour. Leo realized with a start that he had just agreed to walk into the heart of a storm, one that might change how he saw Eris forever. But for the first time since his accident, the thought of stepping into the unknown didn't terrify him. It made him feel alive. And that realization was perhaps the most frightening thing of all. The truth in the files. The next morning, Leo sat in his van outside a small, blue-painted house, his fingers tapping nervously against the steering wheel. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under a pale gray sky. He had barely slept, his mind racing with possibilities about what he would discover today. He grabbed the folder on his passenger seat, the one containing printouts of all the anonymous messages, and took a deep breath. This is it. No turning back now. Eris's house was on a quiet, tree-lined street, a world away from the life suggested by the newspaper clippings. When she opened the door, Leo was struck by how different she looked outside of public spaces. Dressed in a simple gray sweater and jeans, with no Maya in sight, she seemed both more approachable and more vulnerable. "Hey," she said, stepping aside to let him maneuver his chair through the doorway. "Maya's at a friend's house. We've got a few hours." The house was modest, but filled with light and warmth. Traces of a child's presence were everywhere. A stuffed bobcat on the couch, colorful paintings taped to the refrigerator, a tiny pair of rain boots by the door. A framed photo on the bookshelf caught Leo's eye. A younger Eris, radiant, standing beside the handsome man from the news photo, her late husband. Eris followed his gaze but didn't comment. Instead, she walked to a large storage chest in the corner and unlocked it. "Before I show you this," she said, pulling out a heavy document box, "you should know that nothing in here is simple. Here is not simple." Leo positioned his chair beside the coffee table. "I'm ready." For the next hour, Eris walked him through the contents of the box. Legal binders, bank statements, foundation reports, and newspaper clippings. The story that emerged was complex and heartbreaking. Her late husband's family foundation had been funding a children's center in Geneva. For years, Eris, as a board member, had signed off on the expense reports, trusting her husband completely. "It was his passion project," Eris explained, her voice tight. She flipped to a glossy brochure showing smiling children. "But when I went to visit," she trailed off, her hand trembling as she pushed a thin file across the table. It was an internal investigator's report. The center didn't exist. It was a shell, a way to launder money out of the foundation. Leo's stomach twisted as he read the next page, an account of Eris confronting her husband, her refusal to sign any more documents, and her threat to go to the board. The confrontation had triggered a massive internal collapse, and in the ensuing scandal, her husband had died of a sudden heart attack. He was never charged, but Eris, whose signature was on years of fraudulent documents, was left to face the fallout. "You were trying to stop it," Leo realized aloud. Eris's hands clenched into fists in her lap. "Doesn't matter. I was complicit before I was a hero. I was naive, and that naivety cost people. The money was gone." She gestured to the legal documents detailing the investigation against her. Leo understood now. Eris hadn't been a criminal, she'd been a whistleblower. But she had blown the whistle on a crime she had unwittingly enabled. The board had eventually cleared her of wrongdoing, but the stain on her reputation, the suspicion, remained. "Why didn't you just tell me this?" he asked softly. Eris sank into the armchair across from him. "Because part of me still wonders if they were right to suspect me. Because some days I look at Maya and think, what kind of example am I?" Her voice broke. "Because shame doesn't disappear just because you were exonerated." Leo knew that truth better than most. He reached out instinctively, his hand covering hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. "Eris, you're not." A loud, sharp knock at the door cut him off. They both startled. Eris frowned, clearly not expecting anyone. When she opened the door, Rebecca stood there, her crisp pantsuit at odds with the quiet, tree-lined street. Her gaze flicked past Eris to Leo, and her mouth tightened. "I see you've been sharing stories." Eris's posture went rigid. "You need to leave." Rebecca ignored her, addressing Leo directly. "I warned you. Now you're involved in an ongoing financial investigation." She held up an official-looking document. "New evidence has surfaced about the Geneva accounts. The board wants Eris in New York for a deposition." Leo's blood ran cold. "What new evidence?" "That's confidential." Rebecca's smile was razor-thin. "Unless Eris wants to discuss it in front of you." The challenge hung in the air. Eris looked at Leo, her expression torn. He could see the war inside her, the need to protect him from this, battling against the realization that he was already involved. Leo made the decision for her. He wheeled himself forward, placing his chair firmly in Rebecca's line of sight. "Whatever this is," he said to her, his voice steady, "you're not doing it without me there." For the first time, Rebecca seemed to truly see him, not as an obstacle or a bystander, but as someone who wouldn't be brushed aside. Her smirk faltered. Eris stepped between them. "Give us until Monday," she said to Rebecca. "I'll come voluntarily. But today, I need to be with my daughter." Rebecca hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Monday, 9 a.m. She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Leo." She dropped a business card on the small entryway table. "In case you want to hear the full story, from a more objective source." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Eris sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. "Leo, I'm so sorry. I never wanted." "Stop." Leo moved beside her. "You don't have to protect me. Not from this." Eris looked up, her eyes searching his. "Why are you doing this? After everything you've read, after those messages." Leo thought of all the times people had looked past him, all the times he had felt invisible in his chair. He thought of Maya's trusting smile, of Eris kneeling beside him in the cathedral when no one else would. "Because someone once saw me when no one else did," he said simply. Outside, the first drops of a new rain began to fall. Monday loomed ahead with all its unknowns and dangers. But in that moment, as Eris's fingers intertwined with his, Leo realized something astonishing. He wasn't afraid. He felt alive.